Yeah, to be honest, I tend to only work with organizations who are of a like-minded kind of perspective. So they understand that it's about empowering that individual, empowering employees to step into their full potential. And whether that full potential is going to manifest while they're in our employ or elsewhere is irrelevant, because ultimately what you're doing is you're creating a culture that, people that are going to say great things about, and that in and of itself will help you attract that next generation of high performers, right? So it's about almost brand safeguarding, if you will, in terms of safeguarding your reputation, helping people understand that you are invested in the growth and the development of the individual, not necessarily at the cost of the results of the organization, by all means, but ultimately you are willing to take the hit if that growth and evolution is not to take place within your company, which is fine. But honestly, once you start to build some of the pieces that we help them build, that growth trajectory, they start to see some growth trajectories within the company. They start to understand where there's room to grow. They start to see how they can develop and evolve within this organization. We help we help organizations and companies create a culture that encourages and supports innovation and wants their employees, to bring those big ideas to the table and to think outside the box, and those kinds of cultures that enable and fuel that level of creativity and that level of contribution, autonomy, will typically not have that much turnover. People are going to want to stick around for the sheer, nature of the culture and that workplace experience.
Martians landed?
Yes.
Wearing Prada suits?
Yes.
Drinking Henry Seltzer?
Yes.
Chewing juicy fruit?
Yes, and?
Your branding here?
Yes, brand.
Your message here?
Yes, and?
A verse about?
Yes.
Your product here?
Yes.
I'm Hersh Rephun.
Yes, and?
I'm a message therapist.
Yes.
And I have a podcast.
Yes, brand.
That's right, that's it.
Yes.
We'll help you fix the world.
Yes.
Or your bottom line.
All right.
Your bottom line.
Get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast. Yes.
Well, in the hot seat at Yes Brand today is my lovely guest, Lori-Ann Duguay. And she comes to us from French Canada, and there is we turn off the phone, we don't answer the phone. When we are doing the Yes Brand broadcast, wherever we do it, if we do it in America, in Canada, in Switzerland, in Ethiopia, wherever we are broadcasting from, we adopt the voice of this country, and then we are make the guest feel at home. So, Lori, welcome. And what do you have to say to our listeners in France, in Canada? What would you say to them?
Bonjour tout le monde.
That's not a very convincing accent that you have there. What are you? I was going to have you speak to me in French, and then I would just answer in English with it. Oh, okay.
J'ai dit bonjour tout le monde.
Ouais. Yes, so tell us, you are, okay, so she is from the Be People Powered is your company, your brand. I realize
the brand is People Powered Solutions.
People Powered Solutions. But people-powered solutions, and we will get into what it has to do with, a lot to do with human resources and helping people who work in that industry, and really serving to make the workplace a better workplace. And but why don't you tell us a little bit about the evolution that's happened, because we're catching you at a really, really exciting time. And I think it's a cool evolution, in addition to having an amazing, beautiful logo. If you go to Be People Powered, peoplepowered.com, and check out Lori's logo, I think you'll be impressed just from that. But tell us what's going on.
Well, you're right in that I did recently kind of undergo a rebranding of sorts. I launched this company back in 2017, and at the time I was solo, doing my own thing, doing my own consulting stuff, all the while keeping my full-time, secure government job. But eventually I was able and blessed enough to be able to try the gig out full-time. And within the first few months, I knew for a fact that I would never be returning to my government roots. Happy about that. But all the while, the name I had come up with way back when was the people person, because I wanted to be the person that people called when they were having issues with their people. I'm also a certified dispute resolution practitioner, so I do mediation and negotiation, all that fun jazz, and help people better manage conflict, as well as just the more traditional operational HR stuff, setting up systems to better manage your people. But as luck would have it, that's always been like the HR, and anytime you say HR, people kind of cringe a bit internally, because there's this very negative connotation attached to HR in general. That's where you go when you've done things that weren't okay.
Right.
On the
You're
job,
going
or
to
when
get
you've
fired.
Exactly, right? So I've never been a huge fan, but I really wanted my name and brand to say what I could bring to the table. So I was the people person, HR growth solutions. Fine. Then I was blessed to have these projects that essentially allowed me to improve on the workplace culture. So that more strategic side of HR, that unspoken organizational excellence, employee engagement, and really building the workplace culture to attract and keep high-performing employees. So I've deep dived. I'm hoping you're going to edit this out.
Probably not, but
Awesome.
I mean, I can
Awesome.
if you want.
If you blur,
there's a form you can fill out that allows us to edit.
You know how great I am with forms.
Because you're so good at that. So there's a form you have to fill out, and if you do that, sure, we can make all the edits you want.
So sorry about that, folks. Looks like that will be edited out, because I do not do forms. So anyways, I eventually started to see that I was doing a lot more of the strategic type HR as opposed to the operational HR. So I started to think about, how the fact my name really kind of translates to the operational stuff, which is essential to any organization by all means, but didn't necessarily reflect what I brought to the table, that unique value proposition that I was bringing to the table. So at 4 a.m. about 2 months ago, I woke up literally, and I thought, I need a new name. Because I've also, the business has organically grown over time, and I've now added people to the mix, and I have, associates who work and support a lot of the work we do and enable us to achieve kind of our vision as an organization. So decided to rebrand and thought, what is it we're trying to do? We're trying to help organizations transform to a more people-centered approach, for them to leverage and harness the power that their people bring to the organization, and help them recognize the most important customer of all is your internal customer, because they are those who are serving that external customer. So you need to tend to their experience, and you need to craft a highly engaging and highly motivating experience. And they have very specific needs, and it's not rocket science, right? So to understand what are those needs, and then we can come in and help them really map out how to start to infuse more of those, more of the processes within the employee experience that are going to help satisfy those needs. So I realized that ultimately I want people to, and organizations and companies, to become people powered by their people. Hence the new name, People Powered Solutions. Super long story, and a flip in the middle.
Well, what's wonderful though is that it didn't have to be. You could what I mean that in the best way. It's people powered really speaks for itself. It does. The people person would have had to become the people, which starts to sound like a kind of a horror movie that went wrong. The people but people
sounds like carnivorous,
right? Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah, I didn't make it up. But people powered is great because it does. And I remember when we met, this discussion came up about HR and the language behind HR and how it's just got this negative thing, and you wish there could be something that could be used to replace it. And and people powered and people empowerment and people, all of that stuff is really, really good, especially these days when people have come through a pandemic and then maybe decided to change careers, shift gears. So now your clients are, now you come from a government, working in government background. So what kind of clients are you working with now?
Right now, my clients are primarily private sector, corporate, small, medium to, a lower end of large, upwards of, I've got clients who have 30 employees and I've got clients who have 1,500 employees. So that's about the size. I do also, ironically, I also have some government clients, some healthcare clients. So I'm able to kind of work with them to craft that next generation of workers experience to make it better so that they don't end up where I ended up, completely stuck and unhappy and completely checked out of the workplace, right? So it's kind of a unique opportunity to work with the organization that I'm super grateful provided me with 21 years of career, right? And
Right.
experiences and knowledge, and to be able to help do better for that next generation of workers, and also for those who are still there and might be checked out, but with some of the initiatives we put into place, they're able to check back in.
Check back in.
Check
You
back.
can join our check back in program, which is you just you get right back to your desk, and if you come back here again, I'm going to kick your. Like the phenomenon that's interesting is as we become more evolved as employers, the employer-employee relationships and all that stuff, that there are people like you who will help an organization retain their workforce, keep the workforce growing and happy and thriving. But part of that is in some cases saying, okay, let's look at your long-term vision for your career and what you want to do. It may not be here, right? You may not be here forever. And so at the same time, you're helping people possibly transition out. And how do the employers, how does everybody deal with that notion? I think it's great. I think it's awesome and it's smart, because if you make people happy, the happiest they can be where they are, then they'll know if it's not for them. They'll be like, look, I really love you guys. You people are wonderful. It's great benefits. I just am feeling drawn toward this. But how do the employers deal with that when they go through such trouble to get someone?
Yeah, to be honest, I tend to only work with organizations who are of a like-minded kind of perspective. So they understand that it's about empowering that individual, empowering employees to step into their full potential. And whether that full potential is going to manifest while they're in our employ or elsewhere is irrelevant, because ultimately what you're doing is you're creating a culture that, people that are going to say great things about, and that in and of itself will help you attract that next generation of high performers, right? So it's about almost brand safeguarding, if you will, in terms of safeguarding your reputation, helping people understand that you are invested in the growth and the development of the individual, not necessarily at the cost of the results of the organization, by all means, but ultimately you are willing to take the hit if that growth and evolution is not to take place within your company, which is fine. But honestly, once you start to build some of the pieces that we help them build, that growth trajectory, they start to see some growth trajectories within the company. They start to understand where there's room to grow. They start to see how they can develop and evolve within this organization. We help we help organizations and companies create a culture that encourages and supports innovation and wants their employees to bring those big ideas to the table and to think outside the box, and those kinds of cultures that enable and fuel that level of creativity and that level of contribution, autonomy, will typically not have that much turnover. People are going to want to stick around for the sheer, nature of the culture and that workplace experience.
Now, looking at your own career, and you made this, this transition to being an entrepreneur, I guess, solopreneur at one
Maybe so,
point.
yeah.
Yeah. And then it's grown, but now you're leading a team, but it's still yours, and you kind of can set, like you say, you can work with like-minded individuals. Um, you know, what is the trend now? Are you seeing people wanting to find work with big organizations? Are they wanting to strike out on their own with some new paradigm?
I think we are seeing a shift. I absolutely seeing a shift. That paradigm, that new paradigm is there. It's a reality. People are just that whole gig economy. Like, people want to do their own thing, work on projects that fuel their purpose, their passion, and figure out a way to make money with that,
Yeah.
right? And to make a living off of that. I'm actually currently coaching, I think, like 6 different people, 3 of which are ex-colleagues from government who are still in government and are kind of planning their exit strategy and want to be doing some consulting. And the other 3 are just people who have realized they were stuck. They were just feeling stuck in their jobs. And after having worked and coached them through a number of sessions where they realized that, yeah, you know what? My company is trying its best to satisfy my motivational needs, but ultimately I don't think it'll ever be a fit. And so they're
Right.
trying to figure out what that next chapter of their career might look like, and how do they get prepared for it. And ultimately they're thinking that solopreneurship initially, of course, is that next step for them. So I definitely feel like so many people approach me now and say, how do you get to where you're at? How do you leave that company of like that corporate job of 20 years and transition into entrepreneurship and, never look back? What does that even look like? What does that journey look like? And I'm seeing so many people reach out and ask that question.
Yeah, that's pretty, that's like a part of it. Is we notice with our friends as well that, they may not intend to be coaches when they set out to do their new path, but people will say to them, "Oh, how did you do it?"
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Well, it was a process." And they're like, "Well, can you take me through the process?" And boom, you're coaching as a kind of it's both another avenue of lending your talents to something, but it's also giving back to people who are trying to do what you did. Do you have a perspective on how long it takes a person who is from the from not necessarily from the civil center, or from the government center, but just someone who's been working in an institutional setting for a long time and then wants to strike out on their own? What can they expect?
What can they expect? I think it's it's a bit more complex of a question, Hersh, in that it depends what kind of baby steps they've put into motion prior to taking their final leap, right? Like, I had went back to school to do my post-grad. I was already taking on consulting clients. So I think that the evolution happened much faster than it traditionally might, because I had already built my brand, my reputation, while continuing to work full time as a side hustle, right? And then only once I realized it was too busy, the demand was far outweighing the amount of time I could invest while working full time, that I took my year off. And I think because I built it up to that point before I took the leap is why I saw like rapid growth within 2 years, right? Typically, I would say 5 years safely. You're looking at 3 to 5 years. You need to build your brand. You need to really dial in on your messaging, dial in on what you bring to the table, figure out what it is you want to be offering, which is often the biggest. Interestingly enough, a lot of my clients that I coach, they'll come in and they're like, I just know I don't want to be working for the man anymore, or sorry, for a company. Right? Like,
right. Yeah.
What could I offer? So if you're starting there, for sure 5 years, because you got to start by figuring out what it is, that you're really passionate about, what you like, what you could be offering, and then build up those service offerings around that, and then start to test a few out, pilot a few out, and figure out whether or not they're landing. One of the mistakes I made early on is that I was waiting to get all my ducks in the row to just even get that first side hustle gig. Because I was like, no, I got to build this, that, this, that, this. And when that's all ready, I'm going to roll that out. And someone, I'll never forget, her name was Lori too. I've not met a ton of Loris in my life. And Lori said to me, what are you waiting for to just take on that first client? And I said, well, got to make sure I've got everything, all these packages and all these offerings ready to roll. And she's like, how do you know that's what they're going to want? Start with the client, start with their needs, start to be curious about their needs, try and understand their needs, and then build your offerings relevant to what you're hearing. And I thought that was really insightful. And I took on the first client right after that, and I customized their solution and then just continued going that route for all my
Right. Right. And that's smart because you're allowing yourself flexibility. That's the best thing you can have at that stage, is saying, okay, I'm gonna see how this goes. Let's touch on the conflict resolution part of this, because it's interesting. I think of it obviously makes sense in as far as, people and the workforce and employers and employees. Oh, by the way, is there any change in the nomenclature around like employer, employee? Is that a company to company thing, or
it is a company to company thing? And Hersh, I'm struggling with this as I'm writing my book. I'm like using worker, employee. I'm like, what? And you know what? It's people. They're all people. Ultimately, they're team members. I don't know. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to name it. And if there's been a change, I've not been privy to it.
Yeah.
And I might suffer the consequences when my book comes out. So I'm just using a splash of all of them in the book. So
right. Well, that's a good,
that I'm satisfying.
That's a safe bet. That's a safe bet. You say, well, I wasn't referring to you. I was referring to the burden carriers.
Well, it's the same thing as like supervisor, leader, right? Some smaller mom pop shops, you say leader and they're like, no, I have supervisor and project leads. Like that's
right.
I don't even have managers. Like it's the language is irrelevant. At the end of the day, do people come to you for answers or for guidance? Yes. Well, then you're a leader. Now let's start there and help you shift your mindset and pivot that mindset to that leadership mindset.
Well, I have that conversation with people about leadership and thought leadership and what that really means. Does, who determines that whether you're a leader or not? And I think your point is really good, which is that if people are following you, then you're a leader. That's pretty much it. To be a leader without any followers doesn't necessarily make sense, right?
I'm going to change it a bit.
Oh, okay.
In my ideal world, if you're someone and people are following you, then you're boss.
Oh, okay. Well,
if you're at the back and helping people keep their eye on that end goal of where they're supposed to be going and you're leading from behind, then you're a leader.
Well, that's also very well said. Although in my last job, they were all following me, except my job was to show them where the restrooms were. And so I wasn't the boss of that organization, and yet I was leading. So they said, and how I got this gig as a podcaster was I told the people who were hiring podcasters, I said, I'm looking for another leadership role. And they said, well, how many people have you led? And I said, well, I've led thousands, not telling them how many people came into the museum on a given day, but you
were giving them water, right? To make sure that you led even more.
And I said, well, and what have you learned? They said, what have you learned in all of this, your experience as a leader? And I said, well, you can lead people to a water fountain, but you can't make them drink. And you also can't keep them from getting water on their blouse. That's just part of the thing. But man, was it hard during COVID getting work. None of the water fountains were even functional at that point. So look, I could go on and on. I could go on and on with this story, but it's not true. And so it probably would,
lead to a lot of confusion.
Lead to a lot of confusion. Okay. I got myself sidetracked. You didn't sidetrack me. I said, I wanted to talk about conflict resolution.
That's right. That's where it started.
That is, and I cut myself off and inserted another. So how did the conflict resolution thing start? Did you get in a lot of fights as a kid? Is that what it?
Oh, yeah.
what it was?
Can I follow your lead? And yeah.
Sure, yeah, make
I
up
do
something.
all the
Sure.
time. And no, actually, interestingly enough, when I started university here in Canada, we don't do, I think you guys, it's all college, eh? You guys, university or college.
We
is all-
have colleges and we have universities, and
Okay,
they're equally
okay.
worthless. I'm just, well, it's not really true. Just I can only speak from, no, it wasn't my experience was good.
Okay.
Mm. So
When I
yes.
started university, I
Yes.
was undergrad law. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Ah,
And I quickly realized within my first year that this notion of trying to figure out the other party's weakness and capitalizing on that weakness, that hole in their story, and that's what I'm going to pounce on. And that was just, it went completely against the grain of who I am as a person. So I switched my major to humanities and I started talking with people to see, but I still I actually want to do the opposite. I want people to work together to solve their problems. I want to get them talking. And is there not something I can be doing relevant to that? And I didn't want to do like couples counseling or anything like that. So someone mentioned mediation and I started researching it. And at the time there was supposed to be this program implemented throughout Ontario, which never actually came to be, but that would, before you could file a claim in small claims court, so like to sue your neighbor, you had to prove that you'd underwent a minimum of 3 hours of mediation. So I was like, perfect gig. I'm going to go get certified in that, all the while continue my university studies. And then when this rule comes into play, I'm just going to start my gig as a mediator. That's what it is. So I ended up starting my mediation practice as a side hustle while I was still in school full time. And apparently, I don't know why, insert eye roll, wanted to go see a 19-year-old to resolve their divorces.
oh, wow.
You
Yeah.
see the value. So honestly, I think it has to do more with credibility and just authority and how at that age, you're a little skeptical. Anyway, so I ended up, that business led me to be approached to get a job with government, negotiating contracts and whatnot. And 21 years later, I was still there.
Yeah, exactly. And you were
I started there. And then my first contract when I started my side hustle was a conflict resolution.
I love the fact, Lori, that you call it that you use this side hustle thing. Yet with your bearing, and I don't know if everybody can watch the people who see this on YouTube will see how well put together you are and how well you present and all of this stuff. But the idea of my side hustle, because everybody has one now, the side hustle. When I first heard the phrase side hustle, it sounded a little bit sketchy, right? Like, oh, well, his side hustle is he sells, CBD cream on the, he goes,
bath bombs.
before it was legal, CBD cream, and he's got the THC. This is side hustle. Like you open the jacket and you got a bunch of watches in there. But now a side hustle is, I work as a therapist, but I also have a law degree, and I do mediation for couples as my side hustle. It's kind of my side.
Well, if you want, here's a better side hustle, which I also did, and we're not gonna go deep into, and I still actually do.
This better be good.
I sell Mary Kay cosmetics.
Oh, you sell cosmetics. Okay. I love the way you said that like this with your hands over your face, as though that's going to change anything for the listener. We're not going to tell this to everybody, but I sell Mary Kay cosmetics. Well, but that's a side hustle. That's a side hustle. Now I have a very good friend whose entire career is in cosmetics. So that's not her side hustle, but it is selling cosmetics is a side hustle. I think I'm like all side hustle. Everything feels to me like that's why I started the Yes Brand podcast, was to consolidate comedy, working with brands, communicating, interviewing, all that stuff under one roof, so to speak, so that I wouldn't have to feel like anything is a side hustle. But you know what happened? Everything else is a side hustle now. All the other hustles are a side hustle. My other side hustle is as a parent.
I was gonna say your
Being a parent. Being a
It's your
parent is a
family's side
full-time
hustle.
side hustle.
I guarantee.
So we
That
both
doesn't
have
feel like a hustle though.
we both have kids. No, we're being hustled.
That's
being
what
hustled.
it. Yes,
It's their
they have
hustle.
the hustle.
They
It's
have the
their
side
hustle.
hustle. Go back
They
to
heckle us.
when you were 19 years old, and
Yep.
you were like your side hustle was as a marriage counselor. Basically, I know that's not exactly what it was.
Mediator.
Okay,
mediator.
listen. We don't have, like I don't have you. I have you booked for a certain amount of time. I'm not allowed to. Like some of our friends do, where they just pick it up the next day, and the next day after that, you do like 3 or 4 sections of their podcast. I'm not going to
No.
mention names, but I think he knows who he is.
Well, were we just talking about heckling?
Oh no, I'm not going to heckle anybody because I give a heck.
Yeah, exactly.
I give a heck. That's a shout out to our beloved buddy Dwight Heck, whose show "Give a Heck" is one of our favorite podcasts. So,
Absolutely.
and
he's a fellow Canadian, so
he is. But he lives in Edmonton, correct?
Yeah, I don't think there's any snow where he's at though.
Yeah, he's probably got better weather. Well, listen, before we go, I would be remiss if I didn't give you the opportunity to share with our audience a little word of advice. A lot of people they're either building businesses or making moves. That's where this audience is at right now. So a word of advice that you would possibly leave our listeners with.
Was that question on the form that I didn't fill out? Because I'm kind of feeling on the spot here.
Yeah, that probably, no, I didn't. I don't ask that in advance. The other questions had to do with how do you define a side hustle?
Do you sell Mary Kay?
Do you sell Mary Kay cosmetics? And and what's it like to raise teenagers? Okay.
So a piece of advice, I would say build a network, find your community. For me, that was game changing. Being a solo entrepreneur can be very lonely. I know it's in the name. We should be aware of it's par for the course, if you will. But ultimately, just ensuring that I connect myself with like-minded people who are at a varying stages of their business building. So I have, people that I'm, like I said earlier, that I'm coaching along. They're at the very kind of primitive stages of their business and building their business, while I'm also, I connect with those who are eons ahead of me. So I'm a firm believer of never being the smartest person in a room, right? And surrounding yourself with a variety of perspective and a variety of experience and expertise. So if you can build a network and a community that will hold you accountable, but also that you can help connect to each other and to support each other through some of your challenges, it just, the more variety you bring to the table, the more innovative the solutions that they'll be able to generate for some of the challenges that you'll encounter early on, or just even if you've been in business for a while and you're still contending with some challenges. I think the more varied the perspective, the more impactful the solution.
All right.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, then.
subscribe and leave a
Yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?
Yes, friend.
Get your branding on
Yes.
before they're gone.